At first, it looked like a normal birthday trip. Photos. Smiles. A couple celebrating together. A destination that felt like an escape, the kind of place people go to relax, to disconnect, to create memories. Nothing about it stood out. Nothing about it felt wrong. But hours later, she was gone. And the last video she recorded didn't match his story. Because in that video, there was no panic. No urgency. No sign that anything was about to happen. Just her. Looking into the camera. Speaking calmly, almost like she was trying to capture a moment before it slipped away. And at the time, it meant nothing. It was just another clip. Another memory. Another piece of a trip that seemed ordinary. Until investigators watched it again. And this time, they noticed something. Something small. Something easy to miss. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. Because the version of events that was later given, the explanation of what happened that night, doesn't line up with what that camera captured. And that's where everything begins to fall apart. Because this wasn't just about someone going missing. It was about a story that started changing. Details that didn't stay consistent. Moments that couldn't be clearly explained. A timeline that looked complete on the surface, but had gaps when you looked closer. And the deeper investigators went, the more one question began to take shape. If everything happened the way it was said, then why does the video tell a different story? Why does her tone feel off? Why does her body language feel distant? Why does it seem like she's aware of something that no one else was paying attention to? And more importantly, why was that video recorded at all? Because sometimes, the most important clue in a case isn't what people say happened. It's what was captured before anyone realized it mattered. And in this case, that one video may have revealed more than anyone was ready to admit. They said everything was fine. That nothing unusual happened that night. That it was quiet, uneventful, normal. No raised voices. No signs of conflict. No reason for concern. But when investigators began reconstructing the timeline, that version of events didn't hold. Moments didn't connect. Details didn't stay consistent. And certain answers came too quickly. The behavior didn't make sense. Reactions felt delayed. Explanations felt incomplete. Lower tone. And the person who claimed to know exactly what happened may have been the only one who wasn't telling the full story. Before any of this, before the investigation, before the questions began, Ashlee Janae was living a life that people could see. Her presence online was consistent. Curated, yes, but familiar. Photos from trips. Short videos. Moments that suggested independence, stability, direction. To most people, her life looked complete. The kind of life that didn't raise concern. The kind of life that didn't suggest risk. But those who knew her beyond the screen described something more layered. Someone observant. Someone aware of her surroundings. Someone who didn't ignore changes in people. And then there was the relationship. From the outside, it appeared steady. Shared moments. Public displays of affection. Trips taken together. But like many relationships viewed from a distance, that version wasn't the whole picture. Because behind closed doors, there were moments that felt different. Not dramatic. Not obvious. Just subtle shifts. Tone changes during conversations. Silences that lasted slightly longer than expected. Reactions that didn't fully match the situation. Nothing you could point to as a clear warning. But enough that, in hindsight, felt important. And then came the trip. The trip was meant to be simple. A birthday celebration. A change of environment. A moment to step away from routine. And at first, that's exactly what it looked like. Travel went as expected. Arrival was uneventful. The setting, calm. Photos taken during the early part of the trip showed nothing unusual. Relaxed expressions. Comfortable body language. Moments that seemed genuine. But when those same moments were later reviewed, something felt different. Not because of what was visible, but because of what was missing. There were gaps in the timeline. Periods of time that weren't clearly accounted for. Moments between recordings, between interactions, that didn't have a clear explanation. And then there were the smaller details. A shift in posture. A brief hesitation before speaking. A glance that didn't match the tone of the conversation. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would immediately raise concern. Just small moments. That didn't feel right. Accounts from others present in the area would later describe interactions that seemed normal. But normal isn't always complete. Because normal doesn't explain what happened next. At some point that night, something changed. Not all at once. Not in a way that was clearly visible. Just a shift. There are indications of a disagreement. Not fully documented. Not clearly defined. But enough to create distance. And distance creates separation. Separate spaces. Separate timelines. Separate accounts of what happened. From that moment forward, everything becomes harder to confirm. Because what follows isn't witnessed clearly. It's reconstructed. From memory. From statements. From fragments that don't always align. And when pieces don't align, questions begin to form. Morning came. But not with urgency. Not with immediate concern. Just confusion. The response didn't match the situation. There was no immediate escalation. No clear indication that something serious had occurred. And for investigators, that stood out. Because in situations like this, timing matters. How quickly someone reacts. What they do first. Who they contact, and when. And in this case, those details didn't follow the pattern you would expect. And that's when questions began. As investigators began analyzing the timeline, the focus shifted to consistency. What was said versus what could be verified. At first, the statements appeared straightforward. But over time, they began to change. Details were adjusted. Certain moments became unclear. Some answers introduced new questions. Then came the digital evidence. Phone activity. Location data. Communication records. These don't rely on memory. They don't shift under pressure. They simply reflect movement. Interaction. Timing. And what they revealed didn't fully match what had been described. He said he remained in one place. But the data suggested movement. He described a sequence of events. But timestamps indicated gaps. And those gaps became impossible to ignore. Then, investigators found something unexpected. A video. Recorded hours before everything changed. At first glance, it seemed ordinary. Just another recording. But when it was reviewed closely, it raised questions. Ashlee wasn't panicked. Her tone was steady. Her expression, controlled. But something felt different. It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. The pauses. The pacing. The way she looked at the camera. As if she was aware of something. And when that video was compared to the timeline, the difference became clear. What she expressed didn't match what would later be reported. At that point, the investigation reached a critical shift. This wasn't just missing information. It was a contradiction. The timeline no longer held. The sequence of events couldn't exist alongside what was recorded. And when that happens, the direction changes. Focus moves inward, closer to the people already involved. Because when external explanations fail, the answers are usually closer than expected. For those who knew Ashlee, the outcome didn't feel complete. Details were clarified. But clarity doesn't always bring closure. Because there are moments that remain unanswered. Things that can't be fully explained. And those are the parts that stay. And even now, one question still remains. If that video had been understood differently when it was first recorded, would anything have changed?